The command of the Constitution is plain. There is no moral issue. It's plain. It is wrong, deadly wrong, to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country.
Good morning on this Monday, January 17th, 2022, a special Dr. Martin Luther King Day edition of the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. This morning, on the day that America recognizes Dr. King, one of Dr. King's signature legislative pushes remain a hot-button issue, and that is voting rights, and how 54 years after his assassination, America, particularly Black America, is still fighting for the right to cast their ballots as Republicans and a couple of key Democrats push back and stand in the way of the freedom to vote. We have some very special guests this morning to discuss this. Dr. Flonzie Brown Wright has been a voice for civil rights for more than 50 years. A native of Mississippi, she has served her state and the country in many leadership roles over the years and has worked alongside several humanitarian leaders such as Dr. King, Ambassador Andrew Young, Miriam Wright Edelman, Constance Slaughter Harvey, Alice Walker, and Judge Reuben Anderson. Dr. Brown Wright joined the civil rights movement in 1963 when she was appointed the branch manager of the Canton, Mississippi NAACP office. In that role, she registered thousands of African Americans to vote and testified before a congressional subcommittee on enforcement of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. She joins us this morning. Also, Will Jawando is a civil rights attorney, activist, former NAACP vice president and legal aid, former Obama White House official, and current county councilman in Montgomery County, Maryland. He also joins us. We are also expected to be joined by the National Urban League president, Marc Morial, this morning. And finally, we have Jackson advocate, publisher DeAnna, Tisdale Johnson, and Savannah Tribune editor, Tanya Milton. But first, let's go and introduce, I should say, the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr. Dr. Chavis, good morning.
Good morning, Stacey Brown. I'm in Arizona this morning, getting out to vote and challenging Senator Sinema. But I want to just say on behalf of Karen Carter Richards, our chair of the NNPA, representing 230 African-American owned newspapers and media companies across the country, this is another day that the Lord have made, and certainly this is the national celebration of Martin Luther King's birthday, but it also is a day that we're all focused on voting rights. And we're very pleased with all of our guests that are on representing our member newspapers and our other special guests from Mississippi and other places. So let's get it on.
Well, Dr. Chavis, first, as a public service announcement, what's open and what's closed? Martin Luther King Day is here. It's a national holiday, which means some institutions and businesses may be closed. The national holiday observes the birthday, of course, of the civil rights leader who won the Nobel Prize in 1964. He was assassinated 4 years later. You can expect government agencies, banks, and some retailers and corporate offices to be closed. United States Postal Service will be closed on Monday, so there will be deliveries of U.S. Residential or business mail unless it was sent Priority Mail Express. Other delivery service will be open, including UPS and FedEx, albeit with modified service for FedEx Express and FedEx Ground Economy. Big retailers like Target, Walmart, Costco, Sam's Club, and major grocery stores will stay open, as will most national restaurant chains. The hours may differ with local stores and restaurants. And also, finally, the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ are closed on Martin Luther King Day. Same goes for most banks, which follow the calendar for the Federal Reserve. ATMs and online banking services will be available to access. Non-essential government offices such as the DMV and state and federal courthouses will also be closed, so will public libraries. In the news also, to go along with Dr. King's Day, Dr. Chavis, you mentioned the celebration. Well, the King family, Martin Luther King Jr. and his fellow leaders and legions of foot soldiers who battled segregation and racial discrimination marched in countless acts of civil disobedience, and defiance that fueled the civil rights movement. Decades later, to mark this year's Martin Luther King Jr. Day holiday observances, King's eldest son, Martin III, his wife, Andrea Waters, and granddaughter Yolanda Renee King are marching too. They intend to cross literal and symbolic bridges alongside national and grassroots groups and individual supporters. They say we are working to restore the very voting rights protections that my father and countless other civil rights leaders bled to secure. King, of course, is the chairman of the Drum Major Institute, initially launched in the 1960s. He said, "We will not accept empty promises in pursuit of my father's dream for a more equal and just America." So the King family has taken to marching. Dr. Chavis, they've also said that they don't want any real celebrations until voting rights is passed. So it is a long fight. It's still a fight, and it looks like it's still a long ways off.
Oh, well, great. Well, I think the King family is right. If Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself was still alive, he'd be right on the front lines, demanding a return to Voting Rights Act. Remember, we didn't get the 1965 Voting Rights Act until after Selma. And so I think that we have to be vigilant. Freedom is a constant struggle. And Martin Luther King III and the other King members' family, we stand with them in solidarity. So a lot of us are going to be marching today, doing everything we can to demand the right to vote. Not ask for it, but to demand the right to vote.
Yep. And joining us now, Dr. Chavis, our special guest this morning to talk about Dr. King and voting rights is Dr. Flonzie Brown Wright, who's been a voice for civil rights for more than 50 years, working alongside King and others. And also we have with us civil rights attorney and councilman in Montgomery County, Maryland, Will Jawando, and the editor of the Savannah Tribune, Tanya Milton, and the publisher of the Jackson Advocate, DeAnna Tisdale Johnson. Good morning, everyone. I guess the coming there we are. And also joining us this morning, a special guest also is the president of the National Urban League, Marc Morial. Good morning, Marc Morial.
Happy King Day.
Good to see you. And I guess we're having some technical difficulties going on here, but it's good to see everyone. Let's start right off the bat. I know, President Morial, you have a limited time this morning, so I'm going to start with the president of the National Urban League. Look, voting rights is the issue. It is the issue, President Morial. We know that when President Biden gave his speech last week in Atlanta, some civil rights groups, they boycotted. They said he should be in Washington working to get voting rights through. What's the position of the National Urban League?
He should have been in Atlanta, and I'm glad he was in Atlanta because Atlanta is the front lines. Washington, D.C. is the Rose Garden. Atlanta is the front line. Georgia's the front line in the fight for civil rights. And I think presidents shouldn't stay in the White House as though staying in the White House somehow confers that they're working on something versus being out with the people. Let's contextualize today. I think it's important that we all join with the King family who said, today is not a day to celebrate Dr. King, but it is a day to honor Dr. King. But the way we honor Dr. King is to renew, as Ben Chavis just said, our absolute demand for the protection of voting rights and democracy in this country. How did we get here to where we are today? I think it began with the election and the backlash to the election of our first Black president, Barack Obama, when states began the effort and right-wing interests began the effort to challenge in the federal courts the Voting Rights Act, which had been upheld, its constitutionality had been upheld numerous times by the Supreme Court over the last 50 years. They launched an effort to challenge the pre-clearance provision, which is the provision which requires, at that time, Southern states to get pre-approval before they change any voting law. That system worked well for 50 years and provided significant protection to African-American voters in the South from discriminatory laws, discriminatory reapportionment schemes, discriminatory poll location decisions across the line. So that effort began, and it achieved a success, this effort to undercut voting rights. It achieved a success, a negative for us, in 2013, when the Supreme Court, in effect, in a decision which I believe will go down as retrogressive as the Dred Scott decision and as the Plessy v. Ferguson decision in the history of the Supreme Court, that unleashed the tsunami of voter suppression laws that we see today. It gained momentum with the election of Donald Trump, who pursued a nationalist and a white supremacist agenda. And it gained increased momentum after the 2020 election, when we had record voter turnout. And we had record voter turnout because people were able, in the face of a pandemic, to vote by mail, vote early, vote through drop boxes, and otherwise be able to get to the polls. Even though we were in a pandemic, we had a record number of people who voted, significantly close to a record number of Black and brown people who voted. Then there's January 6th. And January 6th comes along, and the anger and the violence associated with that insurrection and coup was followed by an acceleration of proposals in Republican-led legislatures all across the nation to make it more difficult to discriminate, to gerrymander, to just unleash a set of forces that are as retrogressive and as racially motivated as any we've seen in 50 plus years.
Yeah.
So that leaves us to here. And it is disappointing beyond description. We should not be pleased nor happy that last week, Senator Sinema, before even a debate on voting rights,
Well, let me stop you there for one
opposed
second,
to this
President
filibuster.
President Morial. I'm glad you made that point, because that's been a contention that we've made on this program, that at the very least, knowing that the President of the United States, the president that is your party, was coming to the Capitol to have a discussion with you, to go public on that floor before what kind of message does that send to not only the president and your party, but to America?
Look, as someone that served as a mayor of a city, I kind of thought if a member of my coalition had done that to me, I would have considered it and called it out as a cheap political trick. The president should have been given an opportunity to make his case to the Democratic caucus before she outlined what her position was going to be. But what is clear to me is that, based on a meeting we had with her just the day before, is that her mind was made up to thwart a vote. You can't say I'm for the bills and not be willing to take the step necessary to pass the bills. Be that as it may, let us not be dejected. Let us not be defeated. Let us, accelerate this fight and this battle on Dr. King's birthday for voting rights. I want to just add one other thing that has gotten lost in this conversation, and it goes back to 2016. And I think it will repeat itself. And that is the manner in which the Russian Federation waged a propaganda campaign directed at the Black community, primarily directed at younger Black voters, the message of which was don't vote at all. You're wasting your time by voting. And we have to be on guard to any cynical effort which tries to say to our community, look, don't vote, exit the system, and all we'll do is surrender power to others. As difficult as it is at this point in time to vote sometimes for people who we believe we can trust and count on, we have to stay engaged, and we have to elevate this continuing fight for voting rights. So I think that's what Dr. King's birthday is. And I just want to say to you, Stacey, and also to Ben Chavis, we appreciate what NNPA and the Black Press do. You are a breath of fresh air. You are a voice that allows us to get our point of view out unvarnished and unedited and untwisted and unturned. And we sincerely appreciate that, and say the same to all of the Black newspaper publishers across the nation, and urge you all to keep on keeping on.
Well, I know you have to run, President Morial. We appreciate that. But before you run, I better let Dr. Chavis say farewell to you. So let's bring our president back.
Well, I just want to thank Marc Morial for his long-term leadership. You know, the thing I admire about Marc Morial and his family, I knew Marc's father, who was one of the greatest freedom fighters that Louisiana has ever seen, and our nation has ever seen. But Marc, we join with you, and please know that the National Newspaper Publishers Association, we appreciate everything that the National Urban League is doing. We're going to work together. And I think that this can be a turning point today, because the truth of the matter is, we turn Washington when we turn our own communities out, when we start mobilizing. And I'm so glad you spoke to the young people, because there are a lot of fictitious, distractive things out there on social media that try to dissuade young people from voting. And that's what we try to do in the NNPA, is to keep our young people engaged, keep them empowered with the true facts and objectivity. And it's a coalition effort. And I think that I'm so in admiration of what the King family's position on honoring Dr. King through visible activation, through visible nonviolent social change. I think we're going to win this, you know, and so today is not the end. Today is a new beginning. As we reassert our fundamental civil rights, our fundamental human rights, but it's the activation. And we just want to thank you for your leadership, Marc, and we will continue to work together.
Thank you. God bless all. Happy Martin Luther King Day.
Thanks, Marc Morial, the president of the National Urban League. Let's unpack it now. We also have you, speaking of the King family and voting rights, we have someone this morning who's been in the struggle from the 1960s, worked alongside Dr. King. No, we're not talking about Dr. Chavis. Y'all already know that history. We're talking about Dr. Flonzie Brown Wright. She joins us right now. Dr. Wright, how are you? And are we having some more technical difficulties with Dr. Wright? Well, let's also bring on our other guest this morning, I was going to say Dr. Will Jawando, Councilman Will Jawando in Maryland, Montgomery County, Maryland. Also, DeAnna Tisdale Johnson, and of course, Tanya Milton. Good morning again, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah. So as we work to get Dr. Wright back on here, Will, you work with Councilman Will, I should say. You've worked, you're a civil rights lawyer. You've worked with President Obama. Tell us a little bit about your view on this issue of voting rights and what needs to happen at this point.
Well, I appreciate it, and good morning. And I'm glad to see my good friend and fellow Alpha brother, Marc Morial, on. I was just texting with him the other day. And I actually do have a doctorate, an honorary doctorate from Benedict College. So you can use it. So it's not, I don't use doctor though, but I appreciate you saying that. And it's great to be with the wonderful leaders here on as well. Look, I think it was put well. You know, voting is sacred. You know, it was a revolutionary idea in the 1700s to give every, at that point, a white male landowner who was wealthy the right to vote and determine their own destiny. And we have over time been trying to live up to the ideals of our founding documents, you know, giving the right to vote, extending that right to immigrants and to women and to obviously Black people, and then making it a real right. And we're still on that journey. You know, and Dr. King, that's exactly right. He would be right out in the street today. And I'm so glad that the King family is reminding us of that, because we have taken major steps back. And I'll never forget, I worked in Ohio for the Obama campaign the first time around. And Marc Morial mentioned this, of kind of where this latest wave of anti-democratic pulling back of the sacred right to vote has come from. And we were celebrating, we had won that state for the first time since John F. Kennedy, and it helped propel Barack Obama into the White House, the first African-American ever elected. And we were sky high, and it was about 12 a.m. I was taking the trash down at the house I was staying, and there was an older middle-aged white man next door who heard us being excited, and he said, well, I guess racism is over now. And it reminded me that we were going to have a fight on our hands to sustain the effort, and that there would be this backlash. And so I think where we are now is where we've been for a lot of times, is where we're trying to fight for a fundamental right that has not been extended for us for much of the time of this history of this country, but we have to maintain it. You know, Dr. King said, if you give us the right to vote, we won't need anything else. We'll make it work. We'll make it happen. And we have done that. And now they see that we've done that. And now they're trying to take back those same mechanisms so we can't continue to actualize our own destiny. So we have to get back in, put the gloves on, younger folks like myself and others, and take the fight back for the soul of our democracy, as my late friend, Congressman Elijah Cummings would say. So I think that's where we are. And we have to roll up our sleeves and not get discouraged, and take the baton from previous generations and keep this fight going.
Yeah, and Tanya, Milton is in Georgia, one of the hotbeds of this issue of voting rights. Tanya, want to bring you in on the discussion as well. David Youngblood, one of our viewers, we always appreciate David. He writes this, Tanya, and I want you to respond to it. He says, my fear is after 2022, there will be no opportunity to affect changes in voting laws.
Well, I disagree with that. I think that we're going to continue to fight. We've been fighting, and of course, you know, it's definitely hot here because our voting, the opportunity to vote, turned Georgia blue at the last election. That has never happened, and they are furious that it happened, and they're doing everything within their power to make sure it doesn't happen, that they could undo what we did in the last election. You know, we're dealing with our governor, Stacey Abrams, who's going to be a huge ticket on the ballot this year. And she's got a lot of support here in Georgia, in Savannah. And we're going to continue to fight. During the weekend, we started celebrating MLK and celebrating his life and legacy. But we were talking MLK, and what we came to know was A.D. King. And A.D. King was not as prevalent. We didn't know about A.D. King, but A.D. King took the fight to the streets with his brother, with his older brother. And what happened this weekend is we had an unveiling of the bust of Dr. Martin Luther King and a dedication of a city park to be named Martin Luther King Park, along with the bust that was done. And we had Dr. Naomi King, who was A.D. King's wife, widow. She was present with us. So we are invigorating all of our media, churches. We were working with the churches. We were working with the developer who created the park and got the bus done. All of that happened all weekend. So we're going to continue that fight today. Today, we're taking it to the streets. We've got some announcements that's going to be made as far as candidates that are going to be on that ballot in May. So, yeah, we're fired up and ready to go here. We're excited.
Well, thanks for that, Tanya Milton. I'm going to throw it to DeAnna Tisdale. She has a relationship with Dr. Wright. So DeAnna, I'm going to throw it to you and let you bring out some of the points with Dr. Wright that she's done. And it's been so long. I mean, all these years she's been in the struggle. DeAnna, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you start the questions with Dr. Wright.
Well, I'm so delighted to be here this morning. I have known Dr. Flonzie Wright for a really long time and have just marveled over the history that she has been through. She has really charted new waters in Mississippi history and in U.S. history. She was the first Black woman elected as election commissioner in Madison County, which was a place where SNCC, SCLC, CORE, a lot of the freedom houses where young students and young adults and civil rights leaders like Medgar Evers and Martin Luther King went to make sure that they could have a safe space to come up with ideas to fight in the struggle. And so she was very instrumental in that. And I remember her telling stories of how when Dr. King came, he ate dinner at their house, and it was just such a rich history there. And so she has been in the struggle, fighting on the front lines for Mississippians and for Black people everywhere since the civil rights movement. So we congratulate her and thankful that we still have living legends of the civil rights movement with us.
Well, Dr. Wright, you heard all of that, but you've also heard the conversation with Marc Morial and this conversation that's going on with voting rights. I want to get your perspective because you were there for the fight in 1965 and now the fight in 2022. I want to get your perspective on this fight for voting rights. She's frozen up again. Oh boy, we're having difficulties there. But I'm going to go back to you, Will. I'm going to let Dr. Will carry this a little bit. Dr. Will, Councilman, this fight, it continues. David Youngblood brings out another point on his earlier point. He says that if the counting is rigged beforehand, how do we counter that? In other words, okay, so we're not going to get this legislation passed, obviously, at least not now. So what can we do? What can people do?
Well, you're right in that Mr. Youngblood brings up a really important point that the president talked about in Atlanta. For most of our history, it was denying us the right to vote. And they're still trying to do that, not allowing us to, all these states, these 400 some bills in 30 states to claw back the progress that has been made when people turn out and vote, like in Georgia and other places. So they're still trying to deny the right to vote. But this is the thing that is relatively new, in that they are trying to overturn the counting and stop the counting of the votes that have been democratically cast. And with these provisions to allow state legislators, politicians, and I'm a politician, I'd like to say I'm a public servant, but people who have been elected to overturn the people who elected them, their decision, which is as anti-democratic as you can get, and to take it out of the hands of people who are there bipartisan to count votes and to determine a decision. That is a new phase in this voting rights struggle, where they're not only trying to stop us from voting, people who are formerly incarcerated, not allowing to bring stuff to people in lines, to stop same-day registration and voting, and to shorten the time for early voting and vote by mail. All those things are still happening, but they're also trying to change if they don't like the outcome after they do all of that, because they know we're a perseverant people. And we have proven that over our 400 plus years on this continent. Now they are trying to say, well, if we don't like it, we're going to change the result and say it was rigged. That is why we must get up in arms right now. And not just us, anybody, because could be used to disenfranchise any people, not just Black people. And I think that is the fight we're in right now. And it's are we going to be a democracy? The EU has put us on a watch list, the European Union, for anti-democratic nations. We're the United States of America, and we are being viewed by the rest of the world as anti-democratic because we are having insurrections. We're denying people the right to vote. We want to change the results of an election, things that we would criticize other countries for. That's where we are right now. And I think that's what we have to lift up. And I know the MPAA has been doing that. People have to understand the urgency of the moment, because democracy is not guaranteed, and we must be vigilant.
It's interesting you say that. And I want to go back to Tanya Milton, because we had a conversation on Friday with Vice President Kamala Harris, who really said exactly what Will is saying. She said she met with world leaders. She's been meeting with world leaders, and they have asked her what is going on with voting rights, what is going on with democracy in America. She's basically America has pretty much lost this standard as a leader.
And that, I think, came from the January 6th insurrection that went on at the White House, the president not being able to, the former president not being able to accept the defeat. As President Biden said the other day, he didn't just lose, he was defeated. And from all of that, as that has come out, what we have shown the rest of the world is that we are having a dilemma. We are having a dilemma. It's a civil rights thing that it's a civil war that we are fighting right now within ourselves. So what the message should be is that we're going to get out there and we're going to vote regardless of what obstacles they put in our way. There are going to be obstacles, but we've fought over obstacles pretty much all of our days. And we overcome, we continue to overcome. It's a sad thing that we're continuing the same fight and not advancing. But as we continue to move through these obstacles, we're going to show that we can have some solid rock. We're going to be solid with it.
I'm sorry, Tanya, Milton, I didn't mean to cut you off.
We were going through, of course, we've had redistricting here in Georgia. The lines have been drawn and they're now having to add another district to the state. So it's going to be interesting to see just how effective that is. We've had conversations with the voter registration office about where the boxes are, how the last election turned out. And we had the League of Women Voters who went out and purchased boxes, and we strategically placed those boxes, but those boxes are no longer going to be in effect for the upcoming election because they are not in secure places. So they have moved that. The reason for not having the boxes and having access to them is because we got to have secure locations for them. So any little thing that they can do to keep us from not having access is what they want to do, but we're going to show them different. We're going to get out and we're going to vote. We're taking everybody. We're going to go through the same effort. You know, they stopped the Sunday voting, but we do have one weekend where we'll have the Sunday voting, and it's just one weekend. We normally have two, but that's okay. We're going to continue. We're going to push forward. We're going to move forward, and we're going to each one going to take one.
So DeAnna Tisdale, the Jackson Advocate, let me ask you, DeAnna, I'm listening to Tanya, and I'm hearing, you know, some tactics there, but what tactics, what strategies can be used at this point?
Yeah, well, so you just have to keep on fighting. You know, that's the bottom line in any way that you can, whether it's using your voice, whether it's what the young people do now, taking it to social media, whether it's calling your legislators. You have to do everything that you can because we are fighting battles in Mississippi as well. At the same time, we voted for the new Mississippi state flag. We also voted for ballot initiative 65, which would allow the use of medical marijuana in the state. And it resoundingly approved, by voting. And the Supreme Court shut it down because of something with the ballot initiative process, which through that initiative process, when you're trying to get an initiative on the ballot, it says that you need, different signatures, but our signatures state that you need it for 5 congressional districts, and we only have 4 in Mississippi. So through that discrepancy, they were able to overturn the voice of the people. But now it has gone to the legislature and they have passed it. So it has to go to the governor to see if he will sign it or veto it. But Mississippians' voices, when we vote at the polls, need to be upheld. Resoundingly passed, and we shouldn't have to go through all of these hurdles because of loopholes and discrepancies. And that's what we're facing across the board with critical race theory, laws trying to be passed about that. With our state income tax, with teacher pay raises. There's so many things that are pressing issues for Mississippians, especially during this legislative session. And we really need to raise our voices to be heard in any way that we can, because it is imperative that we not go backward. We have fought people before me, generations before, and it's sad that my generation is still fighting and generations after me are still fighting for the right to vote, a right that we should just inherently have, and we're struggling to keep it.
Well, and Congressman Jawando, let me ask you this. Angela Connolly, actually, one of our viewers is asking this question, and I think it's a legitimate question. She says, why not use the post office as a secure drop location?
Yes, and thank you for the promotion, to Congressman. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Councilman.
No,
doctor, now Congressman.
Hey,
I'm not gonna call you president.
Hey, well, I'll take whatever I can be of service of. But we do. Well, the post office is a secure location for, here in the state of Maryland, we have, a couple week period of early voting, and you can drop at the post office here. And again, the way voting rights has been set up in each state, they have their own rules. It's been left to the states. It's one of those delegated authorities. And so I think that's a great way. We also put them at recreation centers. We put drop boxes at recreation centers and at libraries and any place where people have access to transit and congregate and go to for services. We saw those long lines for food during COVID that we're still seeing people in need. That you should make that a place where we should be making it easy to vote. We should have automatic registration like the bill does in Congress. You should have same day registration. We have that here in Maryland, but many states don't have it. So you can change your registration and show up and vote. If you look at countries like Australia, they have compulsory voting. Talk about going, and they've had conservative. This isn't a conservative or Democratic issue. They've had conservative, leadership and presidents there. But they 90+% of their people vote because you get a fine if you don't vote. And it's critical to a functioning democracy. And so we need to remove all those hurdles. We need to make it a holiday, all those things that are in the bill. But in lieu of state action or federal action, states need to step up. And that's why these states, the fight at the state level is so important, because they're the ones that certify those votes. And we need to keep that as nonpartisan as possible. So absolutely post offices, but even more than that.
And real quick, I think we do have Dr. Flonzie back, but real quick, Councilman.
Yes.
What about the notion of the Electoral College, abolishing the Electoral College? Where do you stand there?
Well, I think it's an archaic rule, process. And I do think we are of the size right now. Our founders could not have imagined, how large we would have become and how diverse. And I think there's this idea that you have, it certainly needs reform. And there shouldn't be we shouldn't have been having the debates last time. Can the electors do differently than the voters said, right? That the fact that that's still out there and that's a possibility shows you that it's not a democratic process. If we want to keep the kind of history of it, but the electors must be compelled to report in the way that their voters actually voted. And that today, that's not the case. It normally happens that way, but we remember we were hanging on by a thread to see were there going to be some rogue electors that decided to buy into the big lie and do something different. So it certainly is a process that needs reform. I think direct democracy is the way to go. Count the votes of the people who voted. It doesn't matter where you live. And there's representation for large states versus small states. It's called the U.S. Senate. And every state gets 2 senators. But as far as voting for president, that's a countrywide, nationwide decision, and everyone's vote should count the same. So I think we should do that. But at a minimum, we need to reform the Electoral College process.
Yeah. And I understand Dr. Flonzie still having some technical difficulties. We really apologize for that. Oh, there she is.
Yes, I'm good now.
Dr. Flonzie, we so appreciate having you. Look, I started earlier by saying that you certainly were there next to Dr. King, and others. When the Voting Rights Act passed in 1965, you're seeing what's going on today. Give us your perspective of what's going on today.
Well, thank you so very much for the invitation to be with you. What's going on today is what's been going on all the time. Now, I probably am the senior person on this call, so I can say these things because I've lived them, I've experienced them, and I've been a part of many things to try and effectuate change. But what's going on today, and it's really very, very sad, because at one point there was an effort to try and hide some of the things that are so in the forefront now, and that was to allow Black people to vote. Just think about it. We only really legally gained the right to vote in 1965, which is just a little over 55 years ago. But just think about our foreparents, our ancestors fought for that right for hundreds of years. And so it's sad to say, but sometimes I'm surprised, but yet not surprised. When I think about where we are today, we're fighting some of the same fights that we fought in my lifetime 50 plus years ago, in our ancestors' lifetime. Voter suppression, let me just use this as an example. Voter suppression is not new. It's a new term. It's a more used term, but voter suppression has been in effect in different ways for many, many years. When I ran for public office in 1968 to become an election commissioner, and not only did I succeed in that, but I'm the first African-American female in the state of Mississippi, with the exception of Mount Bio, Mississippi, which is all Black. Before my election, I was running for election commissioner in Beat 1, and that person only had to campaign in Beat 1. Well, Madison County has 5 beats and 13 precincts. And when it hit the newspaper that a colored woman had qualified finally to run for public office, I was required to run in all 5 beats and all 13 precincts, whereas my white predecessor did not have that task. But nevertheless, because the time had come, I still was successful. And he had been an election commissioner for many years. So voter suppression is not new. I think to some extent, we have to remain vigilant. We have to remain diligent in this fight for continuous equality. Now, what I say, of course, and I'm an old woman, and I can say this unapologetically, there were people just waiting for someone to allow them to come back on the scene and be an unapologetic racist. And this is where we are today. Now, I have many white friends, I do, but the thing of it is, and there are some well-meaning white people. Look at the civil rights, look at the persons who came 50 years ago, those people who integrated the Freedom Riders. Many Jewish people, white people, because they were well-meaning, but there was still some out in the boonies just waiting for someone to legitimize their racism. And so this is where we are. And we really, when I hear people say, I'm just so shocked that we're back here. Well, I'm not shocked. I'm hurt because we have to fight the same fights we have to fight. Now, with regard to working with Dr. King, this is a day on and not a day off. Every day should be a day on and not a day off. I had the opportunity to work with him in Madison County, in Canton, and certainly participating and helping to set up the March of 1966. Can you imagine receiving a telephone call from Dr. King personally as they were making their way down through the Delta after Mr. Meredith had been shot? And my assignment was, this is what he said to me, that someone had told him that if he wanted to get something done in my town, he needed to call me. Well, phone rings, here's Dr. King. Yes, sir, how can I help you? I knew the voice. He said, can you provide housing and food for 3,000 people? Well, without giving it a thought, I told him, yes, I can. And I also had the opportunity to tease President Barack Obama in person. And I said to him, I said, so you thought you phrased the term, yes, I can? And then when I shared the story of my response to Dr. King in 1966, we had a big laugh about it. But by the time that those tired, hungry marchers reached my hometown, I had called up everybody who could fix a bologna sandwich. And we fed and slept those 3,000 plus people during that march. I also had an opportunity I was Dr. King's driver. I took him around the city of Canton to show him the Head Start centers, the churches that were supported, the educational program for adults to get their GED certificate, and then took him to my mom's house for dinner. And so I had an opportunity to even introduce him on the same courthouse steps that many of us had been ran out of just trying to register and vote. One of the most impactful things that I remember about Dr. King even today, and this is why after 59 years, I'm still in this struggle. As we were sitting around talking about strategy as to how we were going to proceed with the night march when we were all tear gassed, you know the story. We were sitting at Dr. King's feet, and he said to us, I'm not going to be with you very long. My days are numbered. I'm going to die a violent death. Now imagine this. He said, what I want you to do, there were 12 of us local people in the room. What I want you to do is when I'm gone, I want you to make me a promise that you will carry on this struggle as long as you can. And because I was in my 20s then, I'm almost 80 years old now. And I jumped up. I was the first one to jump up and raise my hand. So yes, I'm here with you today, and congratulations to your association for keeping the word in the Black press. But I'm here today because I made a promise. I made a vow to Dr. King. Hey, Ben, that as long as I live, that if there was an opportunity, I would tell the story. And I've been to jail. I've been shot at. I've been tear gassed. I've had my life threatened, the lives of my children threatened, work taken from my father because I was involved in the movement. But you know, if you don't stand for something, you know the story.
That's right.
You fall for anything. Last year, every year I developed my own Black History theme. Last year my theme was movements change, but commitments don't. See, you can't be in this to be popular because you may not live through it. You can't be in this to be rich because you ain't gonna make no money. You got to be committed to this struggle. And commitment is what takes us through. And somehow along the way, all these years, we have lost that mentality of being committed to what you believe in. And when people ask me, I know I'm talking long because I missed my chance earlier. So I just got on my phone and just came to one of my bedrooms. So I'm in a bedroom now. I don't know what happened to my computer, but anyway, so when you're committed to something, very little things should not be able to deter you. If I was in this other population, yes, I've received a lot of recognition, but that wasn't what I sought out to do because I wasn't sure if I would live through to see somebody give me a plaque. And I appreciate that, but it wasn't for that. It was because I knew I was on the right side of history. And that's what I wanted to be, not popular, but on the right side of history. So when people ask me, well, what can I do? I said, well, you can continue to do what my foreparents did, what your foreparents did, study the history. And if you're committed to a cause, not because it's popular, not because your Ace Boone Coons are doing it, not because your baby's kids are doing it, but because it's what you feel you need to do to continue. Because see, this is going to continue. You know, we're just in a different cycle. This is going to continue. The system never wanted Black people to vote in masses. That's why in 1963, Blacks in Mississippi organized a mock election, even though we knew our votes would not count, because we had to show the system who was saying, well, you know, the color folk are satisfied, or they don't want to vote, they're fine. But we had to show them that we were not satisfied, that we wanted the right to vote. And of course, we organized a mock election, set up precincts, trained people, and more than 80,000 Black people in 1963, before the passage of the Voting Rights Act happened, came out to vote, to show that we were not. So we have to do, I mean, I know the younger generation have wonderful ideas. And by the way, I'm inviting Miss Brown to be our guest speaker at our church next month. Because again, I want to keep our people relevant, our young people relevant, so that they can identify with what they must do. You see, people, I mean, we're not here. We didn't get those degrees and become lawyers and doctors because somebody thought it was a nice idea. We got them off the sweat and the brows of our people who came before us. And we dishonor Dr. King and our ancestors when we don't pick up that mantle and continue this struggle. So, hey, I'm in it to win it.
All
and
right.
as long as I live, I'll be doing what I'm doing.
Well, you're watching the Dr. Flonzie Wright Brown Wright show. Dr. Chavis, I wanted you in on that conversation because I know you guys
I just want to salute and thank Dr. Flonzie Brown Wright. Listen, that this sister is so representative of why all of us got in the movement. I mean, strong Black women, and a lot of times Black women are not given their due of supporters of the civil rights movement, leaders of the civil rights movement. And what Dr. Flonzie Brown Wright has continued to do in Mississippi is just outstanding. Thank you so much. We could have the whole program just with you. And, you know, because your voice, your experience, your insights are invaluable. And I'm glad that LaTosha Brown is coming to be in Mississippi with you, because I think that we're going to be able to turn this stuff around. One thing that Dr. King used to tell all of us, you know, you're right, commitment is so important. You know, I tell people all the time, don't get involved in a movement if you don't believe in it. You have to believe in this. You have to have faith in this. And then sometimes the struggle is not easy, but you continue, you persist. That we're saying we shall overcome when we were not overcoming, but we sang that song anyway, because we know one day we will overcome. And so we have to have that tenacity, that perseverance, that resilience. And Sister Flonzie, I'm so proud of you. Keep on keeping on. We're going to keep on keeping on our end and make sure that we raise up a new generation of freedom fighters to keep pushing forward for voting rights and for all of our rights.
Well, we want to now.
So much. Thank you so much. And Dr. Chavis, you will remember me. We had met. I was Goodlow at the time, Flonzie Goodlow at the time. So we have met before. Absolutely. Thank you.
A reunion of disciples of Dr. King right here on Let It Be Known. This is a special edition of Let It Be Known. We want to bring back Councilman Jawando, also Tanya, Milton, and DeAnna Tisdale Johnson. Wanted to give you guys an opportunity to close out with some thoughts. We'll start with you, Tanya, Milton. Want to give you an opportunity to close with your thoughts on this day.
Well, on this day, as Ms. Dr. Wright said, I'm going to work. I'm going to work. We've got candidates making announcements for the new for the election coming up in May. We've got so some of the candidates are making announcements. I'll need to be there to take any speeches or receive information from them to make sure that they are part of the Savannah Tribune for the upcoming week. And as far as voting, the biggest thing that Dr. King, Naomi King, her statement was about staying in the struggle. You got to stay into the struggle. And Dr. Wright was so dead on with the commitment. It has to be a commitment. You have to make the commitment because you got to have skin in the game. It means more to you. You got to persevere. You know, so I'm just thankful to have her on and to hear her story so that it inspires me to keep going. And perhaps maybe we can reciprocate some of these stories so that we can fire up our young people as we have tried to do to get them to take the vaccine. We got to get them to go vote. So we got work to do. Our work is still not done. So on this day, I honor Dr. King, but I'm also going to go to work.
All right. DeAnna Tisdale Johnson. First of all, DeAnna, before you give us your closing remarks, we thank you so much for bringing us Dr. Flonzie this morning. We really appreciate that. But go ahead, DeAnna.
No problem. She is a delight, and I'm so glad to know her. And I think her story is so relevant to what we talked about today and just going forward. And we need that. We need to bridge the gap between all of our generations. And that kind of brings me to the point that I want to make as we have been preparing for our MLK issue that we do every year. Over the last couple years, I've been looking at the themes that the King Center has brought forth, and it's all been about Dr. King's vision for the beloved community. And I think this really just ties in that we need to bridge those gaps in all of our generations because we can learn from those who are wise, and those who are wise can learn from those who have the passion and the gumption and the youth to get some stuff done as well. And so I think we all need to kind of come together and keep our morals and our values as we fight for what is right. I think that's a part of what Dr. King meant by having that beloved community, by having reconciliation, by still being morally right and a good person as we fight against injustices, that you keep yourself upright as you fight against someone who may not be the same way. And so I think we need more of that in our communities. In Jackson, we are fighting crime like we've never seen it. There are almost 150 young people who died last year. There was a person who shot up a car with a pregnant woman in it, and she died. There was a person who shot another car, and an 18-year-old who just graduated high school died. And this is just within the last month, you know, so not just voter suppression, but the soul of America, you know, as was mentioned before, the spirit of our people needs upliftment so that we can fight against these and we're not distracted by other things that are going on. And so I think that is sort of something that has kept in the forefront of my mind as I look at what it means to have the beloved community.
Thanks so much, DeAnna Tisdale Johnson of the Jackson Advocate. And finally, Councilman Will Jawando, we want to get your last thoughts in about 45 seconds.
All right, I got you. I can do it. Well, thank you to Dr. Flonzie and to DeAnna and to all my colleagues. You know, I hope to visit all of you and see you all. Dr. Chavis, it's an honor to be with you, sir. You know, we have a program in Alpha Phi Alpha. Voteless people is a hopeless people. And to DeAnna's point, that's why it's so important. This violence we're seeing, this hopelessness we're seeing, the disparities in the pandemic, many of them were cracks that were existing because politicians, public servants did not live up and take care of every resident and provide equal opportunity. That's what's connected to voting. This isn't just a theoretical exercise. And as Dr. King would say, the hour is late. The opportunity to change destiny is upon us, and we have to work. And I'm going to work today along with all of you. It's my son's 3rd birthday. I'm gonna show you a picture of him. But I'm gonna take him out to something with double masked with me, so he sees the importance of it too, because we've got to keep passing it on. So thank you to all of you, and it's great to be with you.
Montgomery County Councilman and Civil Rights Lawyer Dr. Will Jawando, okay? Dr. Chavis, we got about 15 seconds, Dr. Chavis. I think we lost your volume, Dr. Chavis. We still don't have it, but we could imagine the encouraging words that you would have to offer us this morning.
What I was just saying is I yield my 15 seconds to Dr. Flonzie.
Okay.
What I want to do, just say this. When President Reagan signed the King holiday into law, ironically, Mrs. Coretta and I were on the same plane coming back from Washington. She gave me this postcard many years ago, and I have kept this as my salute to her. So again, let's stay in this struggle, everybody, because it's worth it.
Wow. What a show this morning. Thank you all. Dr. Flonzie, Brown, Wright, we really, really appreciate you. It's a special week. The APA's Midwinter Conference was scheduled this week, as you know, because of the ongoing pandemic. Our leaders, Dr. Chavis, Karen Carter-Richards, and others thought it best that we postpone it for now, but it doesn't stop. Let it be known, because this week, a special week where all of our shows will be 1 hour long, and starting tomorrow, we will be live from Washington, D.C., bringing you the latest news and full hours from our studios at the NMPA headquarters in the nation's capital. So stay tuned, because we plan to have several special guests this week live from Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We will see you tomorrow.